Hi, welcome to our presentation called Playing Right into Literacy. I'm Marissa and I'm zooming in from New York.
I'm Kathy Collins, zooming from New Hampshire.
And I am Alexander Long, zooming in from Queens.
We're so happy that you've come to join us, and I'm going to start off with just talking about the language of play and how we honor children by allowing their voices to be amplified and our voices to be the listeners. So my biggest thing teaching in the classroom has always been to allow children to let their world be their classroom and let the adult world kind of take a pause. I have done this for many years, and when I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about today, I thought about two big projects that I did with two different groups of children, and what they were getting at with their voices and their interests by what I was seeing in their play. So I start every school year with just listening. I sit there, I watch them play, and I listen to what they're talking about, what their interests are, and everything else. It's a very interesting thing to do when much of your classroom is speaking a language that maybe you don't. I worked at an international school for 9 years, and every classroom had children speaking all different kinds of languages. And many of them I couldn't even come close to understanding. So what do I do as a listener, as a teacher? I mute myself and I allow them to become the teachers. I watch them through their play, and even though the children might not be speaking the same verbal language, they're speaking the same language of play. So last year, I had a group that probably couldn't get enough superhero talk if I gave them 4 more years of just sitting there and doing superhero talk. So I sat and I watched, my co-teachers and I sat and we watched, and we thought, what are they getting at with superheroes? What is the fascination here? And we don't want to stop it, but we want to know how we can bring it further to increase their learning. What we saw was this need to understand what good guys do and how to take care of and stop bad guys. That led to a lot of conversations, including a conversation on what we could do, how we could be superheroes for the school. You see here, after that conversation, we recorded what their ideas were of how they can be superheroes for the school. Could they help people who get hurt? Could they make sure the school is safe? If someone's running in the hallways, we don't want them to get hurt, so what can we do with our powers? We could help them build stuff if they can't do it themselves. And we could help people if they're sick in the nurse's office and give them nice stuff. We could fix people's stuffed animals. And if somebody is being scary, we can tell them to stop. So we had this whole conversation. And then we looked around our classroom, and the children very clearly said, this is not where superheroes live. This is not a place for superheroes. This is a classroom. And so we went to work. We turned the classroom into a superhero lair. And through doing that, we allowed the children to be to guide the learning. So you see here, they traced themselves out as superheroes, and they decorated the wall outside of our classroom with their superhero bodies. This little girl is not a native English speaker, and she's put up her superhero on the wall, and right now she's using chalk and black paper while standing on a ladder, because I wanted to give them independence, to write her name as a superhero. I don't have the exact picture, but she did write her name with different letters, and she would tell you the whole time exactly what her superhero name was and what it meant to her. We split them up into teams. So we had a lot of different teams working on different things. Here you see another girl whose native language is not English, and she's going to one of the books we have in the classroom to copy letters that she saw of the superheroes she wanted to be like in this book. there's that same girl with another girl making a sign for their group's project as superheroes, which was the Fix-It Shop. And their superhero power was fixing things from other classrooms that needed to be fixed. This is a child measuring our classroom loft to see how big we needed to make things to turn it into a superhero lair so they could make all their plans up in the superhero lair. And one of my favorite shots, the same boy putting up his sign to tell them to stop running in the hallways, and another sign about stopping in the hallways, you're running. And then you see these two children on the same team proudly holding up their signs with their superhero capes to tell children to stop running in the hallways. These projects went on and on and on, and the children could not have been more proud of what they were doing. 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, I had a group very interested in babies and animals. And so my TA and I at the time, we stopped and we thought, what is it they're really interested in? Other than content about animals and content about babies, what's the real interest here? And the real interest through their language of play was taking care of something. And we dove into it, and through the children's interests and our active listening, we amplified their voice and turned our classroom into an animal hospital. They were so excited about this, and each one of them had something different to add to our project. Here are two children who saw our completed animal hospital in the loft, and one of the boys said, but what happens if an animal can't climb up the stairs to get to the hospital room? What will we do? And there we see, through his own idea and his own design, by amplifying his voice, he was able to come up with a solution to create an elevator pulley system that would get the animal up into the hospital room. We have children working on different aspects here together with tools that we trust them to use because we've given them this power with speaking and listening, that they know they can speak to each other and listen to each other and use things safely. Here we have a child who saw something on the screen in the animal hospital and came to me and she said, I noticed a problem. This is what I want to do. And here I am as the listener, and here she is as the teacher and the problem solver, telling me what she thinks we need to do. I want to end on one note, and that is this beautiful story from when we went remote last year. And after all of this, teaching them through the language of play and teaching them independence, I had one child who was getting very upset because they could only see my face and not all their friends' faces on Zoom. So I said to her, look at the screen. There's a button somewhere that says gallery view. It's probably on the top of your screen. It starts with the G sound. Look for it and hit that button when you find it. And her mom said, let me do it, let me do it. And the child said, no, I want to do it myself. And we went on with our play. We were doing an inquiry into subtraction and flying to different islands. And halfway through our inquiry into subtraction, child stops everybody and you hear this scream, I found it, I found gallery view, I did it. And just by amplifying their voices and making them feel empowered, we got this child to have this beautiful moment where her understanding of phonics came together with her understanding of independence, and it was just such a beautiful thing. That's everything I have to share on the language of play today. And that's it.
Oh, thank you, Marissa. Oh, as they say, as they do. Awesome. You know, just something quick that from those two stories of your classroom, just that it's such an equilateral triangle. I wrote in my notes between, you know, the play, the language of play, the social interaction. There's so many configurations of kids, you know, with different age, like in the hallway with different age kids together by themselves. So like the play, the social, and then the not academic, but the literacy, the math, the physics. that was coming into play. And I just kept thinking about how your environment is such a teacher. Well, the Reggio, you know, environment is the third teacher. And I don't know, it really popped for me.
Yeah. I mean, I think my goal is always independence and valuing individual voice while coming together as a community. And I hope through their play that we build literacy skills and we build math skills, but most importantly, we build social skills. And that's what, in my opinion, that's kindergarten readiness, not any sort of forcing of academics.
That's awesome. I agree. So I heard multiple times, and I love it. Got me really excited when you said amplifying their voices. And so I have a pseudo question and then a real question. Like, did it get really loud in the classroom?
All the time. And
Okay.
I guarantee I have colleagues that were like,
Yes.
absolutely not. I don't want to go near there. There is no structure in
Oh,
there.
that's the best.
And
that's
it
the
is
best.
too loud. I can't. How does any
Yeah.
learning get done in there? But in reality, there's
Yeah.
so much structure and
Oh,
so much learning that gets
yes.
done.
That's awesome. Well, and the thing that I love to hear the language of play, especially with students who were speaking in literal different languages. Could you I don't know, I'm curious about how did they play with the language barriers? Like that is just so beautiful. Like yeah, I guess I'd just like to hear a little more if you have.
Yeah, I think so. 10 years ago, when I first came to that school, it was a big fear of mine because I knew I was going to be working with children who not only speak Spanish, which maybe I can understand if I get there, and French, if I try really hard, I can understand, but all sorts of different languages. I was nervous, and then within the first couple of years of being there, I noticed that the best way for them to communicate was through the language of play. Because if they're playing family, for example, and they're doing all of these movements, that's a universal language. Yeah. And they learn how to use symbols in their play and in their bodies and read facial expressions, and they play together. And it makes no difference to them that they're not speaking the same language because they're having fun together and they're understanding each other on a deeper level than maybe they would if it was just surface level and they all understood their language.
That's amazing. It feels to me like they created their own identities as learners with themselves in the classroom. And that is amazing. I'm so glad.
You're awesome. Reminding me of this funny story. I've had a student who had some sensory processing issues and some other things, and he would get very emotional very fast, and sometimes the other children in the classroom would get worried and maybe a little fearful, and so I would say out loud, so and so is saying he's upset because he misses his dad. And then a couple months later, we're sitting around and this child got upset, and another child in the classroom said, child X is saying they're upset because they don't want to take a nap right now. And that identity of who they are in the classroom and this empathy that they grow through the language of play and through understanding that they are not all going to be saying the same things at the same time, and that's okay, is just such a beautiful, beautiful thing to see.
Nice. So nice.
Yeah.
So I heard you both use the word identity, which makes me feel like you're queuing me up to go next. So tag over to
right.
Yes, tag to you, Cassie.
So I'm going to share screen real quick. I have some slides that I'll use to, and you can see this. Is it showing? Absolutely. So we're going to be thinking in this small portion about children's identities and the adult, whether it's the teacher in the classroom or the caregiver at home, or all of us, it should be all of us together, especially in our context these days, which are hybrid and remote and whatever. But our adult power to mute, unmute, and amplify children's identities. So I'm gonna, sorry here. I'm gonna be, well, actually, let me go back here for a second. I just wanna clarify, the identity that I'm gonna be talking about in this portion is not human identity, the ones we're born with. And I'm not really going to be talking about cultural identities, the ones we're raised with. I'll be thinking about more malleable identities, the ones that are action-based and socially constructed. And these identities flicker and can flicker and change pretty quickly in a classroom, and especially for young children as they're trying on so many things and so many ways of being. So so the identities, these changing, malleable, transitional identities, I just thought about different categories of them, and I'm just going to run through these really quickly, but there's one we're going to focus on in particular for my portion. So we have our own identity, the way we see ourselves, and, you know, where you'd hear, you know, whether people say these things out loud, but I'm somebody who's generous, and I'm sporty, or I'm somebody who dresses well. You know, we all have these voices inside where we're telling ourselves who we are. And, you know, those might be different. I'm going to jump one. Those might be different than our social identities. Sometimes they'll overlap, but our social identities are the ones that other people attribute to us, where how we're known in our communities, how we're known in our families, in our friend groups. You know, how do others see me? So it might be, you know, I'm somebody who is always, I'm a caregiver. In my friend group, they see me as a caregiver, or I'm somebody who always brings good desserts to the book club, or you know, I'm the baker in my group. So those identities that are socially imposed. Then we have action identities, the I do, therefore I am. We can, you know, what do we do regularly? That informs our identity. So those of us who might be running several times a week can identify as a runner, even if you're running 13-minute miles or 6-minute miles, because you do it regularly. That becomes part of your identity. So as I'm talking about these kind of in the abstract, I would invite you to think about what are some of your identities, like how do you identify, if I were to say to you, what are 3 words you would use to describe your identity, your self-identity? What are some of your identities of action? Are you a knitter? Are you a, you know, well, I used a dessert maker. Are you an organizer, you know, in your house? What are your social identities? If you thought, how do my friends and family and colleagues view me? Who am I known as in my different social groups? That would be your social identity. What are your aspirational identities? These are the things that we want to become. I know I often do little talks, and I'll include this part. Like years ago, remember when we used to get catalogs in the mail back in those old days? I used to love getting catalogs because I would lie in bed and look at some catalogs and really have like reading them as if they were, you know, a self-help book or something. You know, for example, like a Williams and Sonoma catalog. I would read that and really imagine my aspiration to be the person who hosts beautiful dinner parties and, you know, elegant clothes and my elegant home. Not true. It was totally, and it remains aspirational, but those are things that we want to be. And sometimes that ties in with social, you know, our social circle, because we might have a friend who we have an aspiration to be, you know, have some of the traits or some of the characteristics of people around us. They can help us form our aspirational identities. Then we have disposable identities, like when we look back, what, you know, something that we tried on for a minute, but we left behind. And I don't know, I don't mean to stress anyone out, but look back in your high school self. What were some of your old identities from high school? Like, could you imagine, you know, I was so emo, or I was goth, or I was this, or I was that in high school. And maybe that was something temporary for you, or maybe it still lives on. But a temporary identity is something maybe you tried on for a bit, and then you've just, for whatever reason, it could have gone extinct totally, where that's not you anymore. Or it could be something that's lying dormant. And I know, you know, for example, I'll talk to a lot of teachers who, identified so much as readers for and then they had children and their reading lives went dormant. But that doesn't mean that that's an extinct identity. That might have been a temporary one that could resurface. And then, disposable ones. Oh, and temporary, it could be a temporary, the disposable one, I mean, I got a little confused there. It's one we might have left behind, but a temporary one could be one we're trying on, or we've tried on in the past. So the truth, though, of these identities is they don't operate in vacuums. And I tried to visually represent it in some way, but they really act in, I'm losing my words sometimes. They really act in, they act together. So our the way we see ourselves might be quite informed by the way others see us sometimes, or our aspirational identity might be informed by some of the things we do, our action identity. So the point of all of this is that we, in school and at home, because kids they're watching other people, they're in social networks, in our classrooms and in their homes and in their neighborhoods and in their, whatever groups they're affiliated with, they're having opportunities to develop identity. And so we as the adults can really foster some of the, what am I trying to say? We can foster their identity development. So that's what we're going to think about. So we're going to focus on identities of action, and we'll think about identities of action in early childhood classrooms, because these are actions that teachers can help develop through the invitations we provide, the opportunities that children have in a day for play, for work, for play, for interaction, the experiences that they can have in our classrooms, whether they're 100% in person in our classrooms or whether we're toggling between remote, hybrid, well, in person. So to develop an identity of action, these are some characteristics that it's something you do. So for example, I can't say, I'm a runner if I never run. Maybe that's aspirational, but if I never run, that's not a part of my identity of action. So it's something that you do. And when you have an identity of action, you probably have mentors in your lives. So I'm going to just run through this a little bit quickly from a personal perspective, but I invite you to think about your own identities of action, and then we'll pivot to student and children's identities of action. So having an identity of action is something you do. So I would say I'm a runner because I run relatively regularly. I can sometimes be a lapsed runner, but I do have mentors. I have near mentors. I have my little neighborhood running group, that people with whom I run. But then I also have far mentors, people that I I could say one of my sons is a far mentor, because he's such a better runner, like miles away runner than I am, but he can mentor me in some ways because he's got stretches and he's got core things he does that helps him. So he's not somebody I would run with, but he is a mentor in some ways. And so you think about that, your near mentors and your far mentors. We have intentions, goals, and plans around our identities of action. So I might say, I'm going to run a 5K for Thanksgiving, or by the end of the year, I want to be up to running 10 miles, or I might have speed intentions, goals, and plans. So, or you're a knitter, you might say, for the holidays this year, I'm going to knit everyone in my family a particular kind of hat, or, I'm going to knit, for the hospital, I'm going to knit infant newborn caps. So you can have an intention or goal and then plans to meet that. With identities of action, we usually have positive or social networks and support. So we have people we might do it with. We have people we talk to it about. We talk about it with. So even if nobody else in my family were running, I would probably talk about it with them. So we want to talk about the things that we like to do, and it's bonus when we get to talk about it with other people who like to talk about it. So I'm imagining, just connecting back to Marissa with that, the head of STEAM that superhero play got in your classroom. You may have had a few kids who were kind of, maybe for a minute, indifferent to superheroes, but I wonder if, because they were talking about it a lot, it just sort of increased their identity around a superhero identity or a superhero play. So then when we have an identity of action, we probably have positive feelings and attitudes. We like to do it. We look forward to doing it. We think ahead toward when we get a chance to do the thing, and tastes and preferences around it. So thinking about running, I have tastes about when I run, what kind of sneakers I wear, this kind of jacket versus that kind of jacket. Knitters probably have the kinds of yarn they like to knit with, the needles, the little knitting store where they do their shopping, or the kinds of patterns that attract and appeal to them. So an identity of action does have tastes and preferences involved with it. And when we have this identity of action, this thing we like to do that becomes part of who we are, we don't mind when it's hard. And we are resilient. We try to figure things out. Problems are opportunities. Problems aren't action killers, they're opportunities. And that work of solving a problem also reinforces the identity, because you feel so empowered when you've figured something out. And finally, there's engagement, which I guess probably speaks to all of these different categories. So when you think about what you have, I have a live mouse, not literally my mouse, you know what I'm saying. When we have these identity of action that, try to help kids in classrooms develop identities of actions, we want to think about where we have space and time, specifically in school at this point, I'll talk about, where kids have opportunities, invitations, and experiences to try lots of different things. So that, going back to Marissa's, that photograph of the child who created a pulley system to raise baby animals up into the loft, maybe that child is often a builder, likes to build things to go along with play. So he, in this case, that child might have that identity of action. I'm somebody who's a builder. And so we provide invitations and opportunities to do that. But we want to also think about what experiences could we provide this child to expand the identity, where maybe they do that and other parts of play. So I think about this mostly because most of the work that I do in early childhood is in support of children's literacy, their identities and independence, agency, skill and strategy around literacy, specifically reading. So when I think about this in terms of reading, I think about in early childhood classrooms, what are the opportunities, whether it's through center or choice time, for kids to sit and read books that may or may not have been read to them by adults, so they have independence and agency. How do we provide reading mentors? When we're reading aloud to kids, how do we model the habits and behaviors of being an engaged reader? How do we model what it means to read the pictures for children who aren't yet reading conventionally, that if they're making meaning, they're readers? So we want to model and make sure that they have mentors for how to read pictures, having habits around talking about reading specifically. When, what time of day do you like to read? Are you somebody who likes to come in the morning and grab a book and a friend and sit around the books? Are you somebody who likes to read books next to our fish tank because you're a fish expert and you're really studying the fish in our fish tank? So you like to read those eyewitness books because you're the kind of reader who, when you want to know something, you have a habit of reading about it. So, and what intentions, goals, and plans, if I'm reading aloud a book in class and I'm trying to be super seductive, ooh, I'm going to stop here, we've got to get ready for lunch. And when kids say, oh, I want to read that, And then I'll say, oh, you have a plan. Let me put it right here. And after we come back from lunch, you can get it from right here because, you know, you have a plan to read this. So I'm going to also help them name out when they have intentions, goals, and plans around their play, around their reading, around their writing, or around anything in the school day. I'm going to support them with helping them see the social network that they've got in the classroom. So if somebody's trying to figure out something, I might say, you know who we should get over here? Our builder friend, our friend who made the pulley. I wonder, he could help us think about how we might handle this. So we're going to try to create social webs and configurations around any actions that children want to take. Anyway, I'm not going to go through all of these here. You could read on and, you know, just make the jump to think, what would this look like in my classroom? I just want to get to a couple quick last points about this. When we're thinking of our identities of action, it's fueled by what we try, what we do, what we play, and what we choose. That can help take some nascent identity and make it something that's a little bit more solid, where we do feel like that the thing we do becomes part of who we are. And so just to be thinking about bringing this into our classrooms, then what access do kids have to materials, tools, and objects in the classroom? And is it open access? Is it controlled access? What opportunities for play do we have? What do we foster and facilitate? Do we transfer things that come up into play into other parts of the day? So the stories, especially, you know, thinking about Marissa, 2 stories that really trying to figure out, like, it's almost like they had the superhero in this panning for gold and just sifting, and what emerged is the desire to distinguish between good and bad, or right and wrong. And the play, the babies and animals, if you distilled that, it's Marissa said it was really about taking care. And so and then that could be transferred into any other part of the day when we distill the essence of their play. And then looking at what children are choosing and creating more invitations for them to have, you know, I'll have seconds, I'll have more of that. But also paying attention to what children aren't choosing, because that's information for teachers to think, how do we modify this? If for example, with reading, if I realize there's 4 children who never find themselves in the library corner, the book nook in my classroom, I'm going to really wonder that the reason they're not choosing might not be on them. It might be on me to figure out what resources and materials do I need in my library corner that will attract them to come over to read, to develop that identity of action as a reader. And then my last slide will be thinking about the adults in their lives to bring this full circle, muting and unmuting and amplifying identities of action. We have such amazing opportunities. I know the struggle is real with how the COVID impact on our classrooms, but being able to look into a child, you know, usually the home to school pipeline is school to home. Take this home, show this to your parents. And every once in a while it goes the other way. But because we're sometimes in kids' homes through Zoom or whatever platform, we can draw upon what Louis Small called the funds of knowledge. What does the child know at home? How do I bring that into the classroom? What does the child do at home? If the child cooks with their grandmother, what of that can I bring into my classroom instead of, oh, we did this, you know, math game at home in class, let's send that home so you can play with your families. What from home can come into the classroom? What does the child initiate at home? If the child, every time you Zoom, if the child has their pet guinea pig that they're putting into the screen, they're initiating contact and conversation with their guinea pig. What of that how do I help the child initiate in the classroom? And then really paying attention to what they avoid, and not as a negative space that, oh, they're avoiding this, but what are they avoiding, and how might I welcome them and help them feel safe, confident, and comfortable to enter that world of action to expand their identity. So that's my little bit. And just always the questions, what are you knowing now? What was reinforced? What might the implications be in your teaching? And what's next? What's there to wonder? So I'm going to stop the share and get ready to tag over.
Thank you, Kathy. There's so much you said that I want to ask you about, but I think something that really stuck out to me is this idea of plans and intentions. And I think we so often as adults have these plans and intentions for children. And when I was hearing you say, oh, you have your plan, I was thinking about this idea of they come with such strong voices and so many ideas of what they want to be and how much their action identity informs their future identity that they think their future identity is going to be, their aspirational identity, I think you called it. And I think it's just interesting to be very intentional about pointing out when they have a plan and what they're doing. And I just wanted to kind of hear a little bit more about that and how you pick up on those moments. And
yeah, that I feel like there's a certain kind of listening that, how, my dog can hear things on different frequencies. I think as teachers, we have to have so many different frequencies with which we can hear, because sometimes a plan is so subtle. A child's expression of a plan, like, I want to, I'm just going to use orange today, or the child comes in, I'm orange, or I don't even know. And there's something in there as a plan. So even to say to the child, so today you're orange, I just think of a child who always came into school monochromatic, and like outfits monochromatic, and the parents were like, oh my gosh, we can't mix colors. And so what does that turn? So you had a plan to dress orange today. What does that mean for school? And so, I don't know, just I think that you really have to tune your ear in to hear those little buds of plans, because, or the low frequency, not to mix my metaphors, of children's plans and intentions, because think about it, they don't always have power to express plans and intentions. Their days are structured. They're often rushed here and there at home and in school, like, oh, okay, clean that up because we have to get to music. Or parents, finish up your breakfast. We've got to, and they might be playing with their cereal, like putting all the orange Fruit Loops on one side and the, whatever Fruit Loops. So we don't always give them space to express their plans. So I think we have to train our ears to hear them, and also let their plans supersede ours sometimes, which I think can be really hard when teachers are feeling like I'm on the clock in a day and I'm on a scope and sequence across a year. I think that is really a struggle.
Yeah, I think also just to chime into that, I think one of the difficulties right now is, as a teacher who might just be in somebody's home on a screen,
yes,
listening for their plans is so much harder.
Absolutely. And I agree.
Yeah, I think there's a conversation that needs to happen between educators at school and parents who are educators at home about listening for plans. Just one more thing, and then I'll pass it to Alex to ask questions. I tagged into that moment when we were talking about how having your action identity makes a child feel very resilient, anybody feel very resilient, because they're determined about who this is. And you were talking about the child in my picture who had made this pulley system for that. And if you ask him at any point throughout the school year, he would have told you, I'm a builder because I'm going to be an architect. And
that's amazing.
And I just think it's amazing that you saw that one picture and you saw this plan and this intention of this child. And I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I'm synergy. I guess that's.
I mean, just to piggyback on that moment, I was thinking deeply about the things that we want to be and how we get there is really amazing in all the actions that we take, but like it starts in the imagination, it starts in the like play, and that solidifies all it, you can manifest yourself within just pretending, and then all of a sudden you're living your vision of yourself, and that then continues to if I really liked like to as a teacher you have to create the experiences that fosters the identity, and that is something that's I take very seriously. I understand, and I totally get it. Like that is one of my main jobs is to support the child and their own dreams of themselves and how.
Well, and you think, Alex, about identity so much and how, or I'm sorry, imagination. And I just wonder, the teachers who are watching this presentation, how many of you as children pretended you were, you know, maybe played school or pretended you were teachers, or, you know, and how many of the things you do as adults really began with something that you did when you were little, you know, those actions like our family went, one might say my family went hiking, I've become, you know, an avid hiker or whatever. So I don't know, I think you, yeah, the imagination, and you have such a great way to talk, of talking about providing experiences and opportunities. And I wonder, should we tag over to
Sure,
you?
let's do it, right?
Tag, yeah.
Okay, there you go. Well, awesome. Thank you so much. I'm so thrilled to be talking with you guys and learning from you guys. And just to let you know, for the friends out in the audience, my name is Alexander P. Long. If you didn't catch that on the other side, and I teach in a public school in Lower Manhattan. And for the last decade, I've been very lucky to be learning with learners in the classroom. And I've taught science and pre-K and kindergarten. And wow, how much better I am as a teacher because I've just began to learn so much from these amazing people. And so I am wanting to, I'll share my experience in fostering experiences for children. And it started off, I'm gonna share my screen here, and then I have some slides and maybe a few videos as well. So let's try this one here. Okay, so I'm gonna do this, and all right. So this is the muting of our education, the muting of our education, lessons learned from children's interactions with malleable technology to find our human voice again. And I want to just start off by saying, like, what is malleable technology? Well, it's something I made up. You're not going to find it on Webster's dictionary or anything like that, but it's a man-made object which is simple in its functionality, that can be shaped or bent by the user's will, discoveries, or imagination to have new functions and or purpose. And I found this definition through my students' actions. And so I wanted to just show you a few things that I've introduced into the classroom. This is an old Fisher-Price turntable that was mine when I was in kindergarten in the early 80s. And this was a 1961 IBM electronic typewriter. And there are other examples that I will show you as well. But before we get into this, the reason why I introduced this into the classroom was because I started noticing something. And this was a societal shift, especially because we have these things right here in our pockets. We have the world in our pockets. And the kind of sad thing is that the world then starts to exist in our pockets instead of in the world around us. And we are born not this way. We come into this world in a three-dimensional world that there's so much stimulus and so much stuff that we naturally input from everywhere. And I noticed that if I'm on a subway platform or in anywhere, everybody is buried in their phones. And you know what? Like, I do the same thing, but it's something that I really try to be aware of, because there's something that's lost, and that's our connection with each other. And that's the thing that I feel we've begun to start to do, especially in the last 20 years with mobile technology. We've started to become mute ourselves. And I used to be on a subway car and it was so loud, but it is so quiet now, and it's everybody has stopped connecting. And so I started seeing this in the classroom, where kids would come into my classrooms and be like, "Where's the iPad? Where's the iPod?" And I'm like, "Whoa, we don't have any of those here." And they started to really kind of rely on that, and maybe they'd been introduced to that technology at home, but it started to show that they didn't know how to, they didn't know how to talk. They didn't know how to really begin to play with each other as I remember, and growing up and earlier generations of that. And so I started to think to myself, like, these kids are not interested in each other. They play by themselves, and it was strange, and it was slight. It wasn't fully blown, but it was definitely slight. And I said, okay, they definitely want this input, this to have something to use. And so I started to reach back to my own childhood, and I started to get these kids involved with some things that I had on hand. And so these right here, this is pretty amazing stuff that, you know, I still am in shock that the fact that this record player that I had as a kid, and boy, I was not easy on my toys. I mean, this thing still worked. It still worked this way, and then the arm came up over, and so we would have these conversations with kids in the classroom, and we would start to make observations. And I said, "Tell me what you notice. What do you see?" And I remember so many vivid, like we would write down observations and on a board, on the chalkboard or whiteboard, excuse me. I'm sorry, I'm not that old. But we in this one, I remember this one quote. They observed on the typewriter. Oh, there's letters and numbers. I recognize some of these things, and we would start just to kind of explore. And then I said, well, what would happen if I press that button right there? And then I turn it on and the thing would start humming, because it's like a tank from 1961. So, and they were like, oh, and the question that I kept on instilling in them is, what would happen if I did this? And they created then rules of how they could work it without breaking it, so another friend could use it later. And when we started to explore more and more, it just was really amazing to me to see what started to happen. And what started to happen was these kids started to slowly, slowly they were touching the vinyl. Now, if I were to talk to any of my DJ friends, that is the number one no-no of all things, but not in Mr. Al's classroom, because anything was malleable, anything could be explored. And they started to experiment with different mediums. Like, we have a 35 here and a 45 record here, and they loved it. I had another piece of technology I had was an old security camera that I found, and I hooked up to this old TV that I got from Craigslist for free. And they would start to experiment with their own image. And it wasn't purposely set up like it is on a camera and a computer where it's a mirror. I tried to put it at different angles so they saw themselves outside of themselves and started to create the narratives that they worked into really naturally. This was some of the work with some of the kids who were working with paper. I had long paper specifically to be able to have kind of like a roll of typing. And I will tell you, like, you're going to hear some of this. It was like an orchestra sometimes. Kids would just be like all over the typewriter, and this thing, being a tank, could handle it and handle their explorations and handle their like tests, their constant interaction with these things. And so the things that I started to learn was that these kids started to go deep. deeper than what I thought these machines would do. They started to read the vinyl. These kids started looking at the actual songs, and one of my students said, "Mr. L, it's like pages on a book. Each song is a page," and I'm like, what in the world? Yes, absolutely, yes. And they started to go deep and wanting to know more and more. I had another set of students who would listen to Michael Jackson's Beat It over and over and then, not the whole song, just one phrase he said, and they would die laughing. But as I started to watch really what they were doing, they would move the needle to the exact part on a blank disc to where Michael Jackson says the word Macho Man in Beat It. And I'm like, what? How did you even find this? And they were, I mean, I started to see these bridges. I started to see these things that were literacy and pre-literacy skills that I was blown away that they were connecting these things. And the children started working with this technology and not allowing them to be taken over by it, but inserting themselves into it and making it work for them. And I had also, I had a karaoke machine, and they would constantly be telling stories. It was almost like amateur hour. They would be telling jokes like it was like, something at the Improv or something. Like, they were amazing that they would just be interacting with this technology in a way that was so much more deep than anything that I would have thought. And so I'm going to show you some examples of some videos that I had that, so we can show this quick little one here. This was an example of just a quick little moment, but this was an experiment of what would happen if the needle was just it hopped around. And it produced different sounds because the child found that if you put the needle on the paper, it hissed, and if you put the needle on, if you flipped it, you would hear a tiny moment of the song. And another one was this one here. This was pretty amazing, where they started to mix mediums together, where we had people who wanted to have a dance party, but let's have a dance party to Beat It. Oops, here we go. So you could see that they were totally immersed with this idea, and how, these technologies could really be used by their own will. And I have a few more things, and then this was pretty amazing. These kids were, we had a TV set up, and they were talking, and I asked them, I said, "What are you guys watching?" They're like, "We're watching Use TV." And I go, "Wait, like Use?" And they're like, "Use," and they're watching themselves play Family, and it was as if they were making their own sitcom right in the middle of their own play. Yeah, is this the one? Yeah. So you can see that they kept on checking back over and over again to see themselves in their own narrative. And what amazing oral, oral storytelling that is, and how that they were able to, see deep. And I just felt so, I was blown away by all of that. And so the thing is that I have one more to show you, and this was pretty awesome. And I'm sorry, I'm definitely, I get excited and inspired by these amazing people. These kids just finished a book on the typewriter, and this was their share. Where is it now? So
Part two. That's smart too.
So you could see that they didn't even realize that I was taping them because they were so immersed in their own like stories, and they typed it all out, and then they made the images, and then we stapled it together. And the parents were at the end were like, "Al, more books? Like they're making?" I'm like, "Yes, they're making more books. Like that's the best part. Yes, they're making more books." And they were so empowered by all of this that I was just so taken by all of it. And the thing that I wanted just to go back to the slides real quick, and then the thing is that the thing that I noticed was that they stopped being muted by what technology had been given to them at home. Whether it was a program or an app, they had to follow rules. They had to figure out the world a programmer had made for them instead of figuring out their own rules and making that connection to the technology. And I just felt so inspired by that these kids taught me one of the things, and that was to have a malleable mindset. And I will say that when we went remote and all of that interaction and socialization and all of that real human learning stopped, and we were forced to use the technology that I was avoiding in the classroom, I was turned on my head. I said, what am I going to do? I tried so hard to get away from this. And now we're forced to be in a world of someone else's programming. And so I had to think about this for a long time. And I realized the thing is, as always, in my whole career, I've learned so much is listen to the kids. What are they going to teach me how to do this? And I will say that like I had to have a malleable mindset and thinking about the things that worked and that didn't work. And the thing that I started to see was that even though we were on this two-dimensional screen and there were so many little new things. Oh, did you see the new Google this? Or did you see new Google that? I said, wait, hold on. Let's just start with one thing. And we started to talk about muting and unmuting our microphones and how that was an important part of how we could make this malleable, how we could have our students and our learning be in control of their own learning, be leaders in their own learning instead of followers of someone else's programming. And so we started to find these malleable ideas by muting. We would talk about the play and pause button for our morning messages. We started to draw on photos. You could see here that these were examples of malleable, like we talked about how we can make photos our own. And this was one of their favorites because this was Mr. Al, totally, I was like, yes, they loved this, but this was the idea to create this world within this restraint. And how the thing is that we had to figure out this together, and learning from them was how we got to where we were. One of the major things that I wanted to share was that we started to have centers. And this was a long process, but they started to play together online. And you could see right here that this girl, she was outside and he was in his bedroom and she was in her living room, and we were alone together. Somehow or another, they, with their malleable mindset, started to bridge the gap. And it started to expand, and you start to see these kids playing, and all of a sudden, not that they're only playing with each other, you start to see that the classroom is becoming their home. And you start to see that they're using this way of communicating, this way of using technology in their own way to show what they've done. And so I wanted to just show a couple videos because I felt so inspired by my friends who I learned so much with that there were two incidences that I want to just share real quick. One of them was a live centers where there was actually kids interacting and um, asking how you built something. So these two kids were very far away. And you can see, do you like it, Gray? He says, and then they're talking as if they were just across the table from each other. And the other one I wanted to share was this, and this was so mind-blowing to me because this was a perspective where there was a child who was in Mexico and there was another child in New York. And we were having centers, and I just didn't realize how deep it was when they were able to work this way. And take a look at what happens when these two kids started to play together and what happens at home where they were thousands of miles away from each other. And this is what happens.
Where's she going? To Mexico. Yeah, we have to go back to us. Mexico is very far from here. 3, 2, 1, let's go. Okay, I'm off to Mexico. Yay! So that was just the moment.
So that was just a moment where it was so natural to them and so real, but mind-blowing to me because it just shows me how much I have to learn from them. And so I wanted to just leave you with, when you start to think of technology and where we are as people and how we are so disconnected now, physically disconnected from all around the world, I want you to just take a moment and think about this very simple piece of technology that has infinite possibilities. And yes, this is a piece of paper. And yes, this is a piece of technology because it is malleable, it is bendable, and anything that you think can happen on this paper, just like what I learned from my kids. And so I just want to say thanks for listening and having me tell my story because I feel so inspired, and I hope that you get to take something from what I learned and make it your own.
Oh my gosh, Alex, again, thank you. It's so nice to see, in both of your classroom settings, just to see how the interactions, like the material can be a great mediator. And just thinking about, two kids in karaoke in your classroom, and thinking about Marissa's kids who have totally different linguistic backgrounds, but what they do share is an understanding of how to play with this. And I don't know, it's just that idea of malleability, which, I picked up from you in our different planning talks, like your malleable mindset. You weren't, it seemed like, well, I guess you weren't following Zoom rules, like, that come up in a faculty meeting. You were it's so pure figuring it out with your kids. Do you ever, just a quick question, do you ever feel like you're jumping off a cliff? I don't know if that's, I don't mean that necessarily as a negative thing either, but where you just don't know what's about to happen.
Yeah,
I guess that's for both of you.
The best feeling when you don't know what's about to happen and then your mind is blown because you trusted the way things, just you trust in learning. And I think that's the most freeing thing, is like there's so much that I have learned from my learners, and that I don't know. I think I have so much faith in that yeah, I'll jump off a cliff. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But we'll learn a whole bunch a lot on the way down. And I will also say that being resilient in failure is always the key to, you know, nothing's going to be perfect. Even thinking about like, how many times, what if I messed up on this presentation? Well, there is no mess ups. It's just there's is. That's it.
Yes, exactly.
And so having that be guided by, you know, in pre-K world and early childhood, there are no mess ups. It's only until we get later into education where like I did something wrong, or no, you're learning. Like that's the thing. And so it's very freeing to not be afraid of anything.
Yeah, and I guess I have a question for you, Alex, and then maybe this question goes to you, Marissa, too. Just that idea. So Marissa, well, in Alex's classroom, you have this malleable technology. So I'm thinking about teachers who are listening who are like, you know, I have an old Viewmaster, or I have an old, you know, sewing machine, Barbie sewing, well, whatever, sewing machine from when I was little. I want to bring this into my class. Or in Marissa's case, there's a head of some energy around some sort of topic, theme, or whatever. So you go home on a Friday and you think, I'm going to bring that thing in on Monday, or what am I going to do with this? So what's the next step? What would you say to like your next step advice for teachers who are used to being maybe more tightly planned?
Well, yeah, I agree. I think that just to give the time for exploration, even if it's just the time, like when I would introduce those pieces of technology, I mean, it would maybe take 2 or 3 days in a large group. What do you notice? What do you think? What's going to happen if I do this? And building that together then creates this structure that they are in control of, you know. And so I remember this when we did the typewriter, this one girl, she goes, it's like a computer, but better. I go, yes, it's way better. But she was saying because it was instant it was instant words. It was instant, it was something they connected, and it wouldn't have happened if we didn't give that time for them to explore and me explore at the same time. And so even if it's just like 15 minutes, 20 minutes, just to sit and say, hey, I got something here. Like, we should talk about this all together. And wow, the energy shifts, and it's just pure exploration with no goal in sight except to learn more. And I'd love to hear what Marissa has to say about that.
Yeah, as you're talking, I'm thinking about this wonderful art teacher who I worked with for years, and we would co-teach when she would come into the classroom. So she would come in for center time, and we would always, before center time, we would have choice time, whatever you want to call it. We would have our center time meeting, and that's where we would introduce either a new center, a new material, and she had this brilliant way of bringing in a new material or bringing in a new piece of equipment, whatever we were doing, and just all the children would just get this fascinated, almost deer in headlights look as they're looking at what she did. And our first question always was, what do you notice? And I think to start anything with children, it's what do you notice? And I was listening, Kathy, as you asked the question, you said teachers who are used to being more planned. And I think the thing about teaching like this is you need to have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, and a plan Z.
Yeah, so you're super planners.
Yeah.
Probably in some way.
Right.
Or envisioners. Maybe it's more envisioning possibilities and having like a plan.
Yeah, I wish I had a picture that I could share with you of the way that I plan, because it's my mind on paper. In the middle, you see this, whatever I had gotten out of watching them, idea, and then you see like 8 million different outshoots, and then 8 million different outshoots from there of where this could go and what this could mean. And I think, you know, the first step is always asking the children what they notice, and then the next step is take those photos and take those videos and write down what you hear, because, and I sometimes would put audio recorders around the room because I can't be everywhere, but I wanted to make sure I was muting myself and unmuting them. And I just, I mean, that's my best advice is to not be afraid to get your feet wet and jump in.
That's
And then my, like your two bits of advice, and my advice from the outside is teachers, find a buddy. Just find somebody who has that disposition, and it's been such a pleasure to work with you two and hear about what's going on in your classrooms as we plan this. Thank you so much.
you. This was,
Yeah.
I learned so much already, and yeah, this was awesome. Awesome.
So I guess we'll meet with teachers, or
Yeah,
people will go
I look
live in a
forward
second.
to- I
Yes.
look forward to learning
Something
from
like that.
you guys out
Okay.
there. Any
Yeah.
questions, thoughts, questions, concerns? Boy, that's what an opportunity, and that's a big honor. So thank you for watching.
Yeah, thank you all.
Okay, awesome.